to hold the Union together prior to the Civil War, Henry Clay stated, 1,800 years have rolled away since the Son of God offered himself for the salvation of our species. When we shall be translated from this into another form of existence, we shall behold the common Father of whites and blacks, the great ruler of the universe.
This has been an American Minute with Bill Federer. For a free transcript, call American Minute at 1-888-USA-WORD.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at VCYAmerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And friends, we've got a lot of audio we want to share with you today. Yesterday, Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson held a press conference inviting several members of the public to tell their stories, their firsthand accounts concerning their adverse reaction to the COVID shot. We're going to start with some introductory comments from Senator Johnson. Then we're going to be hearing several clips from people who told their stories. Because of time, we're delving right into it. Here's Senator Johnson.
It's kind of sad that they need courage to be able to tell their story. But I also want to thank all the members of the media that are here, that are willing to hear their stories and hopefully take their issues seriously. I do want to be clear at the outset, to a person, we are all pro-vaccine. Personally, I've had every flu shot since at least the swine flu. I'm current in all my other vaccines. I was a huge supporter of Operation Warp Speed. Happy to acknowledge that over 300 million doses of the vaccine have been given in the U.S., and for most people, the vast majority of people, the vaccine has been administered with little or no side effects. And I personally believe the vaccine has saved countless lives and certainly contributed to the end of this pandemic, which is what everybody in the world wants. And so I think I can speak for everybody. We had a real nice session up in my office earlier. I think that's the general attitude, but again, I'll let the group speak for itself. But again, just because the vaccine is generally safe doesn't mean that it's 100% safe. Last week, the Wall Street Journal carried a column by two doctors, Dr. Joseph Ladapo, he's an associate professor of medicine at UCLA's School of Medicine, and Dr. Harvey Risch, he's a senior professor of epidemiology at Yale School of Public Health. The op-ed was titled, quote, "Are COVID vaccines riskier than advertised?" In that column, the doctors report that, quote, "The large clustering of certain adverse events immediately after vaccinating is concerning." I would agree. And then they list four that follow that pattern of clustering immediately following vaccination, and they're listing low platelets, non-infectious myocarditis, that's what you're hearing about, the inflammation of the heart with generally younger men, deep vein thrombosis, the clotting, and death. So today we're here because Ken Ruckers, I think you probably all recognize Ken, a lot more famous than I am, reached out to me. And I'll let Ken tell his story, but the story of him reaching out to me is one that I think everybody will sympathize with. What's been happening over the last year and a half is people that are trying to tell the truth, people that are trying to get answers, are having a hard time getting their truths communicated without being vilified, without being ridiculed, without being censored. And I think that's the general experience of the people in this group that are going to be talking to you today. And so Ken had heard of my advocacy for things like early treatment, but also the fact that I've been raising the issues in the CDC's own warning system, the VAERS system, and taking a fair amount of flack for it and being attacked for it. But I'm not sure I'll let Ken tell the story, but it seemed like he didn't have any place else to turn. So he called me up, or contacted my office, so I called him back. And we got on a Zoom call with members of their group, and it was about almost 2 hours, a good solid hour and a half. I know it went on. I had to go take another phone call. A lot of tears. What I came away from that phone call was, this is a group of people that have a very simple request. They just want to be seen. They want their stories heard. They would like to be believed. You know, from my standpoint, I thought I could at least help on the first two. I could work with Ken and we could create an event so that they could be seen, they could be heard. It'll be up to the audience to see whether they give them the believe part. At a minimum, I hope they are taken seriously.
Hi, thank you for being here today, and thank you again, Senator Johnson, for giving us a platform to be able to share our stories. My name is Cheryl Rutgers. I live in Oregon. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, and a grandmother. I'm also a graduate student completing my degree in clinical mental health. I'm also completing a professional internship at a group home for adjudicated females as a step down from formal corrections, and it was that that afforded me the opportunity to be in phase 1 of Oregon's rollout of the vaccine. On January 14th, I received the Moderna vaccine. The next morning, I woke up with severely swollen lymph nodes in my neck. Could barely move my neck. 3 days later, I woke up in the middle of the night with stroke-like symptoms. I went to the emergency room. My face and scalp were tingling, numb, and burning with pain, and my left arm and legs were weak and also numb. Since then, I have been seen by multiple neurologists, one of whom diagnosed me with vaccine-induced autoimmune neuropathy, although he did tell me that he was flying blind because he had never seen reaction like this to a vaccine, and hence doesn't know how to treat me. I also had one neurologist who diagnosed me with multiple sclerosis, despite stating that my brain scan showed absolutely no evidence of disease. I do not have MS, no. My scans are clean. Over the course of 5 months, my neurological symptoms have intensified to include neuropathy in both feet, involuntary muscle twitching and weakness, internal tremors, intermittent essential tremors in my hands. I have sort of Parkinsonian symptoms. I have debilitating brain fog. I have facial paresthesia and nerve pain. And that happens all day long for the last 5 months. I said in the video that I feel debilitated, and this has been debilitating for me. Before my vaccine, I was very healthy and active. I enjoyed fly fishing and mountain biking, hiking, and chasing after our grandkids. I also enjoyed my graduate studies, and I also just went to the doctor once a year for annual checkups. I was very grateful for good health because I have friends who do not have good health. Since my vaccine, I have debilitating brain fog and an inability to sustain my focus on my studies and my demanding internship, to the point that I had to drastically reduce my counseling client load by 75%. My neurological symptoms have left me barely able to function some days, and the internal tremors create a type of fatigue that I have never experienced before. I'm unable to fully participate in the activities that I enjoyed before being vaccinated. My life has been negatively altered as a result of my vaccine. Will I get better? Will I develop Parkinson's or MS or ALS or another neurodegenerative disease? I don't know, and my doctors can't tell me if they know. So what do I want? I want our neurological injuries to be recognized and acknowledged by the CDC and the FDA. This will allow the medical community to research with freedom and openness that's necessary to help us and the many people that are coming behind us. As it's been stated, I'm pro-vaccine, I'm definitely pro-science, but I'm also pro-informed consent. And these vaccine injuries are real, but people don't know. People need to understand that these reactions exist and they need to be researched. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Candace Hayden, and I'm from Michigan. I received the Moderna vaccine on March 2nd and the second dose on March 30th. On April 18th, I had a typical day, swimming, running, and gardening. I was beginning the training for my next triathlon. At 7 p.m., I turned to my left and felt an odd pain under my shoulder blade. I took a step and my right leg buckled slightly, but I didn't think anything of it. I continued with my day. And then around midnight, I went to stand and both my legs buckled. I was suffering from severe paresthesia and was partially paralyzed from my chest down. During the 26-day hospital stay, I had 6 MRIs, 2 CTs, a TEE, a spinal tap, and several blood tests. They ruled out MS, transverse myelitis, spinal cord stroke, and autoimmune disease. Medically, there was absolutely nothing wrong with my body. After 7 days, the medical team prescribed an aggressive dose of steroids that resulted in no change. I started inpatient therapy after 17 days, and I was released from the hospital on May 14th with no concrete diagnosis. The head of my medical team told me that I should get used to being handicapped. I started and am still in outpatient therapy, and on May 21st, I visited my primary care doctor as I was instructed, who told me that she couldn't offer me anything, but if I needed her, to give her a call. My medical team at the hospital refused to associate my condition with the vaccine, and I continually asked them to report to VAERS, but I don't think that they did. It defies my imagination that we can find each other. But the medical community refuses to draw the lines and recognize that people are suffering similar adverse side effects. Case in point, I was able to locate another patient in the hospital that I was in with similar symptoms, brought it to the attention of my medical team, and they refused to even speak to that patient's doctor. I don't have a spouse, nor do I have young children. In one respect, I'm truly blessed from my family not having to have to suffer. But it leaves me isolated and lonely. As my interactions with others is limited, this is far worse than COVID lockdown. Before this, I was healthy, I was active, and self-sufficient. I fear my diminished quality of life is my new normal. Will I ever run again? Will I ever ride my bike? I would give anything to get in my car and just drive it. My greatest fear is for others like Maddie, the children, those that are younger that don't have a voice, that can't tell you how they're feeling, that don't understand why their legs are no longer working. I am pro-vaccine. I am pro-science, and I understand the vaccine is for the greater good. However, I also understand that we represent a small portion experiencing negative side effects. We trusted science, and we did our part. As a result, we are now synonymous to wounded soldiers who should not be left behind. We are asking to be seen, we are asking to be heard, and we're asking to be believed.
From a press conference yesterday, we'll have some more testimony given right after the break. You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, president of the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, did plants evolve?
Chris, according to evolution, both plants and animals evolved from an original single-cell organism which itself came from non-living chemicals. If you look in a book on plant evolution, you'll see many references to plants changing into other types. But when you look for the evidence, you'll be disappointed. Now, there is a lot of evidence that plants have varied over the years, but did they evolve from something else? We have lots of different kinds of algae and ferns and flowering plants, but no clue that any of these basic categories evolved from another. Each were created separately, just like it says in Scripture. In Genesis, we read that God created each basic type after their kind, not by changing one kind into another. Face it, Chris, evolution didn't happen. Now creation, that happened. And we read about that when we go back to Genesis.
Thanks, Dr. Morris. This is Chris O'Brien. Thanks for tuning in.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Yesterday, Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin held a press conference and invited people to tell their stories, their firsthand accounts concerning their adverse reaction to the COVID shot, stories that are not being told by the media, stories that are being absent from social media. And so we're going to continue with a few more of these testimonies here today on Crosstalk.
Hi, I'm Christy Dobbs. I do really appreciate you all being here today. It means a lot to us. And Senator Johnson, Senator Johnson, thank you so much for your willingness to have us here so that my voice can be heard, but not just mine, but thousands behind me. As I said, my name is Christy Dobbs. I'm from Missouri. I am a wife and a mother of 4 children, and I have practiced as a dental hygienist for the last 17 years. And since being in such a career, I have always been pro-science and pro-vaccination. Before my vaccination, I was a healthy and active 39-year-old. I enjoyed activities outside, traveling and crafting with my family. I also cherished my work in a very busy pediatric dental office. I was not taking any medications prior to the vaccine, and I have never had a COVID infection, and I have been tested for proof. In January, my life changed drastically. Immediately after the injection, I felt an odd tingling type dripping sensation in my arm. I had immediate heart palpitations and a feeling as if I was going to pass out. I'm so sorry. And my blood pressure reading was so high that I don't know how I didn't have a stroke. I cannot quote what it was, but as a hygienist, I take blood pressure readings on my patients before I treat them, my adult patients. And it was so high that I was scared in that moment that something was happening to me. I did eventually stabilize. They monitored me for the 15 minutes and then an extra 30 minutes after. And I did stabilize, so they went on ahead and sent me home. When I got home, I felt a little, woozy, a little dizzy. The next couple of days, I just had a headache and just kind of that feeling of unwell, all of the things that I had signed up for to get the vaccine. But it was 3 days later that my symptoms increased and accelerated. I had a sharp stabbing pain in my scapula area that was just this intermittent, like a knife stabbing pain. I had tingling and numbness throughout my body. It ran down both my arms. I also still had the heart palpitations. I had these internal vibrations. And the only way I can explain the internal vibrations is it feels like you have this little electric shock running through your body, like you're stuck in a vibrating chair, like glued into it, and it never stops. I have tremors in my hands, which has made me leery if I'll ever be able to practice as a hygienist again. And like Cheryl, I am so fearful that I may have some sort of neurological issue after this with Parkinson's. They have ruled out MS, but again, they have not told me that I have anything. They can tell me what I don't have. I have swollen lymph nodes, brain fog. I had brain fog so extreme that I would be having a conversation with someone and I would black out. Try to come back to that conversation and nothing was there. Swollen lymph nodes, muscle weakness, unexplained skin rashes. I had convulsions and nighttime seizures. I had to have my 6-year-old daughter wake me up from a fit in the middle of the night. No 6-year-old should have to do that for their parent. I have also experienced thick, clotting, heavy menstrual cycles. I was so afraid that I literally, and I have it with me, I prepared my will and my obituary for my family because I didn't think that I would wake up to the next day. I have reported my symptoms to VSafe, VAERS, CDC, FDA, Pfizer. I have also sent information to 2 very well-known research institutes, and I have also reached out to prestigious universities. I've been dealing with this for 5 months. These past 5 months, my severe neurological reactions continue to plague me. Every day feels like I'm trapped in the movie Groundhog Day. I go to sleep praying, thinking I'm going to wake up the next morning and be better, and I'm not. I've had multiple tests, more than any person should have to go through this time in their life. I have had x-rays, blood work, MRIs, CT scans, ultrasounds, EEGs, and more. To date, the medical community has still remained baffled and unable to restore my health. I'm scared and frightened for my future. So I do have hope, and this is why I'm here today, speaking out. This is not an easy thing to do, guys. But I hope that our conditions will be researched and studied. I hope that we can find a solution and a pathway to health. That's all we want. I would give anything. I would give my whole life savings if I could go back to January 17th and never to have had to experience this in my life. And 3, that those that are suffering and that those that will come behind us, because the vaccine is still rolling out, that they will benefit from us coming forward and speaking today. We have suffered long enough. I think that we do deserve this time that you've given us today, and we are so gracious that you've taken your time to be here today. But we do deserve to be seen, which you are seeing us today, and heard, you're listening, but we need to be believed. That is the biggest issue. We just want you guys to believe that this is real. We are real Americans. We are real people experiencing these side effects. So I thank you for doing just that today.
That was Christy Dobbs. Here's yet another testimony.
So first, thank you, Senator Johnson, for the opportunity to share Maddie's story, and to all of you for your willingness to listen. This isn't easy for me, and this has been very clearly emotional. So I'm going to read what I've written so I don't lose track. My name is Stephanie, and this is my daughter, Maddie, and we live in Ohio. On January 20th, Maddie received her second dose of the Pfizer COVID vaccine as a participant in the clinical trial for 12 to 15-year-olds. All 3 of our kids volunteered and were excited to participate in the trial as a way to help us all return to normal life. My husband works in the medical field, and I have a degree in electrical engineering. We are pro-vaccine and pro-science, which is why we agreed to let Maddie and her 2 older brothers volunteer for the trial. Before Maddie got her final dose of the vaccine, she was a healthy 12-year-old who got straight A's and had lots of friends. She had a life. She was energetic. She was not like this. Although she does still have lots of friends. Upon receiving the second shot, Maddie immediately felt pain at the injection site. And over the next 24 hours, she developed severe abdominal and chest pain. And the way she described the chest pain, and I quote, "It feels like my heart is being ripped out through my neck." She had painful electrical shocks down her neck and spine that forced her to walk hunched over. She had extreme pain in her fingers and toes. It actually made them turn white, and they were cold whenever you touched them. She had edema. So my husband immediately took her to the ER as instructed by the vaccine trial nurse administrator, which is what we were instructed to do. Her blood was taken for a renal profile and tested. She was checked for appendicitis, which she did not have, and given an IV with some medicine, then sent home. However, in the discharge papers from the Children's Hospital ER that she went to, the diagnosis stated adverse effect of vaccine initial encounter. This would be the only time that was written in her medical charts, but it's in there. Over the next 2.5 months, her abdominal, muscle, and nerve pain became unbearable. She developed additional symptoms that included gastroparesis, nausea and vomiting, erratic blood pressure and heart rate, memory loss. She mixes up words, brain fog, headaches, dizziness, fainting. She fell and hit her head, and then seizures. She developed verbal and motor tics. She had loss of feeling from the waist down and muscle weakness. Drastic changes in her vision, urinary retention and loss of bladder control, severely irregular and heavy menstrual cycles, and eventually she had to have an NG tube put in to get nutrition. All of these symptoms are still here today. Some days are worse than others. Our greatest challenge came when her doctors began to consider an alternative diagnosis. Well, she really didn't have one before, so it was the first one. So, like everybody else, she had lots of tests, but not nearly as many tests as everybody else, and she's a child. Why didn't they do all those tests on her? Sorry. So, because they couldn't figure it out, one physician labeled her as having functional neurologic disorder, saying it was due to anxiety. This concerned us, and we didn't agree with it because she doesn't have anxiety. Look at her. I mean, what 13-year-old can sit here calmly, okay, if they have anxiety or mental issues? At one point, they even tried to admit her to a mental hospital. So we did seek additional medical opinions, some of which came from this group. In June, we connected her neurologist with another doctor that's doing research on adverse reactions like Maddie's. She was finally provided, but they finally gave her an MRI, did an MRI of her brain, an MRV, and a bunch of additional blood tests. It took 5 months to get that done. Over the past 5 months, Maddie has been to the ER 9 times and has been hospitalized 3 times for a total of 2 months in the hospital. What I want to ask, Maddie volunteered for the Pfizer trial. Why? Why aren't they researching her to figure out why this happened? So other people don't have to go through this. Instead, they're just saying it's mental. If anybody's mental, it's me. So today our journey as parents to help our daughter Maddie continues. All we want is for Maddie to be seen, heard, and believed, because she has not been. And we want her to get the care that she desperately needs so that she can go back to normal. Why is she not back to normal? She was totally fine before this. She did the right thing trying to help everybody else, and they're not helping her. Thanks.
That was Stephanie, her 13-year-old daughter, Maddie, sitting right by her side in a special chair with the NG tube going in and sharing their experience. As she said, my daughter volunteered for the Pfizer trial. Why are they not following up on her? Why are they treating her now as a mental case? Well, friends, we're going to take a quick break, and I've got one more testimony we're going to be sharing with you. It's a preschool teacher who enrolled in the Phase 3 clinical trial. She'll be sharing her story, and then Ron Johnson will have some important information as well. Now, the clips we have in the next segment are very long, and right after the break happens, we're going to go right into the segment featuring Brianne Dressen, who will share her story as it relates to her adverse reaction to the COVID shot. Back in 1 minute, you're listening to Crosstalk.
Are you aware of past crises when America's fate hung desperately in the balance? From the French and Indian War, the Revolution, the Civil War, and in other national events, leaders in our country called the nation to prayer. In the book Miracles in American History, author Susie Federer, the wife of historian and researcher Bill Federer, recounts 32 amazing stories of answered prayer from American history. You'll read about events such as the winter at Valley Forge, the Boston Tea Party, dense fog that appeared, allowing 8,000 troops to escape, the Star-Spangled Banner, and other events where prayer had an impact. You'll also learn when Apollo 13 was lost in space, what happened after the president called the nation to prayer. It's a reminder as to how badly prayer is needed for our nation today. Copies of Miracles in American History are available for a donation of $18 to VCY America by calling 1-800-729-9829. 1-800-729-9829.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America, and we're getting right back to the press conference that was held yesterday by Senator Ron Johnson, with people telling their story of their reactions to the COVID shot. Let's continue on right now.
I just wanted to say thank you all for being here to hear these stories. And as you can see, now I have to see your faces. We are like family. We have suffered together for so long in a way that no one understands but us. So we really do appreciate you taking your time to give us a voice, to give us this opportunity to plead our case. A huge thank you to Senator Johnson. He's been very kind and very generous with his time. I also want to say thanks to Senator Lee, my home senator, and his staff for their compassion and for taking our concerns seriously. And they're actively working with us to help us find a solution. My name is Breanne Dressen. I am a preschool teacher in Utah, and I am a mother of 2 small kids. Like everyone else here, I am a strong supporter of science, and I have always believed in the importance of vaccines. I was so confident in this that I enrolled in the Phase 3 clinical trial here in the United States for AstraZeneca. Within minutes of my first shot, I felt tingling down my arm, and by that evening, my vision had become blurry, and sound became distorted, and I developed hyperacusis, which is a sensitivity to sound. Within 48 hours, I landed into the ER, the first of many visits. My sensitivity to light and sound became so severe that I had to be confined to my bedroom alone in darkness and silence. Even brushing my teeth was painful. I then began experiencing erratic heart rate, blood pressure, fluctuating body temperature, extreme nausea to the point that I lost over 20 pounds. Just before Thanksgiving, I lost control of my legs and my bladder, along with my dignity. At the hospital, I was treated for a severe migraine, and when that didn't resolve anything, they told me it was anxiety. Next came the vibrations, and they were internal vibrations in my brain and all through my body. I couldn't think, I couldn't eat, I could barely breathe. This persisted 24/7 for months. I was trapped in isolation and in silence, completely overwhelmed by the sensations attacking my body. My children went days without seeing me. I missed out on months of their lives. I did not buy a single Christmas present for my kids. I thought I was dying, and after months, I wanted to die. After months of suffering alone, I found Dr. Hertz and her group. I was initially relieved to hear others like me. However, my relief turned to alarm as our numbers grew, and then it started impacting kids. All of our experiences were similar. Healthy people who became ill after receiving the vaccine, whose doctors insisted that these reactions were not really happening, that the CDC would have told them. They blamed MS. They blamed anxiety. They blamed migraines, anything but the vaccines. A new friend of mine had long haulers Then she received the vaccine in hopes that her symptoms would improve. However, rather than bringing relief, the vaccine took what little progress she had made, leaving her severely debilitated. We talked often, many days just trying to hold on. Then I hadn't heard from her for a few days, and I get a phone call from her husband, and she had become a victim of suicide. The human toll is real. This is not some benign reaction. This thing overtakes your body, and you have no choice but to hold on and hope that you survive. We have been robbed of our cognitive abilities, our physical abilities. We cannot work. We cannot care for our families or our children or ourselves. We are struggling to make it through each day, abandoned by our healthcare teams. We are the collateral damage of the pandemic. As you can see, I am recovering. I can walk. The touch of my little son's hand no longer feels like it's setting me on fire. The sweet sound of my daughter's voice no longer feels like it's attacking my brain. But I have a long way to go. I still am unable to work or care for my children. We had to refinance our home to hire a nanny. Before this, I took one medication, a thyroid pill, every day. And now I am on 9. And that's just to turn down the dial just enough to make the symptoms bearable. We all volunteered to receive the vaccine to try to help to end the pandemic, but now we are suffering. COVID has impacted all of us. For some, it has resulted in loss of life. For others, they are now long haulers, debilitated and suffering. There are long haulers who have got the vaccine and their condition improved. There are long haulers who got the vaccine and they stayed the same. And there are long haulers that got the vaccine and now they are worse. And there are some who never had COVID and are now severely debilitated and sick. This is us. We are part of the full picture. Please do not erase us. Please do not make us invisible. To the media, we need your help to start the conversation, to help us end the stigma surrounding the term COVID vaccine reaction. To the CDC and FDA, we desperately need you to communicate with the medical community what is happening. To our elected officials, we need help getting momentum for research for early intervention strategies so that when these patients do arrive in the ERs and hospitals, physicians will be equipped with the knowledge and tools to help us. To the medical community and to research institutions, please help us. Please hear us. Please believe us. Thank you.
Senator Ron Johnson with some comments following this testimony.
I want to thank the media for coming here and hearing the stories. I'll just say I, for one, believe them. I don't know how anybody can listen to these stories and at least not take them seriously. Yeah, I understand we all want this pandemic to be over. We're all hoping that there was that silver bullet to end it. And so I completely understand now that we have a vaccine and it has been effective and we have 300 million doses and most people receive it and they don't suffer symptoms, why there's such a desire to just overlook, to downplay what's happening to our fellow human beings. That small minority that are suffering severe symptoms. We want to deny that reality. But the first step in solving any problem, and I view this as a problem, is admitting you have one. And I think, unfortunately, because that desire to end this pandemic, I think too many people in the medical establishment and in our federal health agencies are, if not completely ignoring, certainly downplaying what is happening. So what I would like to do is put up 3 charts. These are all supplied to you. By the way, this is what's gotten me attacked. Just showing what is publicly available information by the CDC. This is the CDC's early warning system on vaccines. It's been up and operating for 31 years. It's called the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. Do we have this up yet? It's coming up. Go full screen. So what the first chart shows you is just a bar chart showing what the VAERS has reported in COVID deaths since the vaccine first began administered. And as Dr. Risch and Dr. Ladapo pointed out, there are these reactions that are clustering around the first few days of receiving the vaccine. I think you heard that from the group here. Their symptoms started almost immediately. But in terms of deaths, on day 0, the day you get the vaccine, 619 people have died, and it's been reported to the VAERS system. On the day after, the day 1, 764. On day 2, 353 people. And then it tapers off. Now, I presented this to Dr. Collins, the head of the NIH, a couple months ago. I think this is when total VAERS deaths were something like 3,000. His reaction was more than disappointing. It was just basically, well, Senator, people die. We've looked into these, and except for back then, I think there were 6 cases of childbearing age women dying from blood clots. That's the only thing that we've connected to these vaccines. Okay, again, none of us are medical doctors. None of us are medical researchers. We're not pretending to be, but we can see the publicly available information. We can look at the numbers. We can take a look at this data and go, this is concerning. This ought to be taken seriously. This ought to be looked at. Put up the next chart. So here are the actual numbers. And I've got 2 columns here. The first column is the VAERS reports for just COVID-19. This is over the last 6 months, basically. The other column is the adverse effects for 31 years, since the VAERS system was established on July 1st, 1990. So you've got 6 months worth of data sitting right next to 31 years worth of data. So total number of deaths under COVID is 4,812. For the 31 years before the COVID vaccine, all of the vaccines, total deaths were 5,039. We're fast approaching 31 years worth of deaths with just the COVID vaccine. Again, we talked about the deaths on days 0, 1, and 2, 1,700 versus, again, 31 years worth, about 1,900. Permanent disabilities, almost 5,000. Over 31 years, it's been about 12,000. Total hospitalizations, 21,440 in 6 months versus 37,694 over 31 years. Now, there are many problems with VAERS. It is far from perfect. It does not prove causation or necessarily even correlation. But one of the problems with the VAERS is it dramatically, generally underreports the adverse events. There was a Harvard study said that the VAERS system only captures about 1%. Now, I would personally think because of COVID, everybody more people are learning the VAERS system. Still, the vast majority of people don't even know this exists. But my guess is you probably have a higher percentage reporting of COVID adverse events than you have in the previous 31 years.
We're going to take a quick break, and friends, we've got one more brief statement from Senator Ron Johnson, and also we'll give you opportunity in just a moment to just give short sound bites, your reaction to this press conference that was held yesterday. Back in a minute. You're listening to Crosstalk.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brandon House. Our website's worldviewreport.com. On June 27th, there was breaking news that the United States military had struck a Iranian militant group that were running drone programs right there on the border of Iraq and Syria. Those that are Bible prophecy students will immediately recognize the significance of that report. Think about it. Syria and Iran. Iran, Russia, Turkey, right there in Syria. I saw a picture recently where the president of Iran, the president of Russia, and the president of Turkey were all in a group picture with their hands clasped together. They're in military alliance. This has not been the case except for a very short period of time. And the Bible tells us in Ezekiel 38, these groups, along with others, will make up a coalition that comes against Israel, and God will protect them. Bible prophecy is being set to be fulfilled.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. Yes, a lot of audio clips here today, but Senator Ron Johnson held a press conference yesterday, and these are stories not being told. We wanted you to hear them. I've got one more brief clip from the senator that we're going to air, after which, if you want to get online here, just a very brief statement that you'd like to make here pertaining to this today. Our number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. Let's go right back to that final clip here from Senator Johnson.
This chart shows adverse events in the first 5 rows, again, over that 31-year period for different drugs. And we're just comparing adverse events for different drugs. So again, the first 5 lines, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, flu vaccines, dexamethasone, which is a steroid that's being used to treat COVID, and Tylenol. So you got 3 columns here, the number of adverse events over 31 years in the first 5 rows. Then you have number of deaths, then you have average deaths per year. So you can see ivermectin, let's just concentrate on death per year. 2 for ivermectin, 23 for hydroxychloroquine, 38 for flu, 150 for dexamethasone. Again, you put something in somebody's body and people have adverse effects. Tylenol, 730 on average per year. It's one of the reasons I've said that, you compare the safety record of ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine to Tylenol. Tylenol is probably the more dangerous drug. Then you take a look at remdesivir. This is the drug that's been given emergency use authorization. It costs over $3,000 per dose, per treatment. We've got 4,699 adverse deaths. Adverse events related to remdesivir, 1,100 deaths, 1,200 deaths. And I think the real number that you ought to concentrate on is, again, in just 6 months. Remdesivir that's about 1.5 years worth. For COVID vaccines, it's 6 months. 384,000 adverse events, 4,812 deaths. Again, I'm not a medical researcher. I'm not a doctor, but I'm an accountant. I understand numbers. Just looking at the numbers, this is something that would concern me. And I do not understand why our health agencies have not paid attention to Maddie and Stephanie and Christy and Cheryl and Candace and Bree. What's going on? What's happening here?
What's going on? What's happening here? Senator Ron Johnson holding this press conference yesterday to give a forum for people to tell their stories, real stories of people that have been impacted by the COVID shot, stories that much of the media will not give out, social media not allowing these stories to go forth. You're hearing it today on Crosstalk. We have time just to get to some of your very brief reactions. We don't have time for long stories today. We'd like to hear from you. 800-733-9829. Vincent in Fort Myers, Florida, you're on the air.
Yes, I'd like to make 2 quick statements about the vaccination. One was Marvin Hagler took that vaccination. He died the very next day. And the first thing his wife said was the vaccination had nothing to do with it. This man was completely healthy. That's the one. The second thing is the thing about these testimonies is that the people are educated people.
Yes.
And that if they can pull the wool over our eyes using the people who are the most educated, engineers, doctors, if they can pull the wool over their eyes, people like me, a construction worker, I honestly, I refuse to take this day.
Okay, thank you, Vincent. Yeah, they were pro-science, they said, the pro-vaccinations. Courtney in Miami, Florida, you're on the air.
God bless all you saints. For the first time in my life, I haven't got words to say. It really hurt me to hear about the woman that committed suicide.
Yeah.
And I'm just asking you saints, pray for all these people.
Yes.
We're so blessed in this world with the immune system that God gave us. It hurt me. I'm a hard-leg man, but it brought tears to my eyes. I hate it. I hate it. God bless you now.
Okay, thank you, Courtney. Marla in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, you're on the air.
Yeah, unfortunately, what all they said doesn't surprise me. I'm just glad that they came out and said that. And I just wanted to cry because I can't believe all the stuff that they're saying. And the other thing I want to cry about is that people will hear this and still not believe it. And you've got testimony of people, and it's like, wake up, because this is going to damage you if you get it. And I'm not getting it. If I lose my job because I don't get it, then God will provide some other way.
Thank you, Marla.
Thank you.
Jerry is calling next in Michigan. You're on the air.
Healthcare worker had COVID bad, had the vaccine. The number of people who have been adversely affected, I do believe it, but also you can multiply by a few thousand, multiply by thousands, the number of people who have been saved by the vaccine. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Jerry in Janesville, Wisconsin, you're on the air.
Yeah, how come Ron Johnson didn't report on the fact that over about 55 people or 54 died of the bird flu, swine flu, and it was the liberal media that went after the vaccine manufacturers to get that stopped? How come he didn't report where are the liberal media on this one?
Thank you, Jerry. Marianne in Duluth, Minnesota, you're on the air.
Yeah, Senator Johnson is a hero and a saint. He's one of the few senators that's bringing it to the forefront. But people need to wake up and stop listening to the media and go on to the internet and go on to like Dr. Major, Solon Gold, and all the other great doctors that are the true doctors. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. Jane in Wheatland, Missouri, you're on the air.
Hi, I'm Jane. I'm really happy to hear these testimonies because I had a similar experience that I hope resolved. But the night before I had my vaccine, I had this urge to research it, which was kind of, late in the game because they had told me that there were some supply available at the clinic in my hometown in Wheatland, and I'm 63, so I thought, well, I better get it while they have a supply. But what is this mRNA vaccine, all about? Because I am not allergic to vaccines. I have no allergies. I've had every vaccine, the shingles, the flu, hepatitis C. I was in healthcare. I was a teacher, so I was always trying to prevent getting anything and exposing anybody from anything.
Sure.
And my husband is 7 years older, so I didn't want to get COVID if he was 7 years older and going to go get a vaccine.
Jane, I'd love to hear more of your story, but we are frankly out of time, and I apologize for that. Thank you for your call here today. Friends, we wanted you to hear firsthand what happened at this press conference yesterday. Senator Ron Johnson was getting so many stories, he said, I've got to hold this press conference to make people aware. These people are real. Their stories are real. Thanks for listening to Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.